Welcome, everybody. Yes. Thank you all, thank you all, thank you all. All right, welcome back to the 4th Annual Game Devs of Color Expo 2019. Thank you for showing up. All right. My name is Kwabena Mpofu. I'm your host, in case you were not here earlier. Really quickly, there are a couple things that I always ask. Number one, some of you may remember, but when I say something like, are y'all ready to get this show on the road? Everyone says, yeah, with the fire in the belly. So, are y'all ready to get this show on the road? Yeah! So sexy. Ooh! All right. Next thing, anytime we bring up a guest, we are going to show them love and affection with a loud round of applause. So, if I say something like, and here comes your next guest. See, you're all amazing. You don't even need me. All right, so we're about to kick this off. We have our panel coming up. It is hip hop and video games. If I end up saying something like Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. See, that's all I only said 4 words, but everyone knew it. So we have this panel coming up. We are gonna have our moderator, Shawn Allen, who's gonna come up and he's going to give a little history, a little background, but this panel is going to explore how hip hop and video games are intertwined and how they can benefit from each other, learn from each other. So if we can have Mr. Shawn Allen come up.
So hi, thank you all for coming today. I've been trying to work on this panel for a very long time, and thankfully it's here, but I feel like it's the beginning of many to come because this is a very big topic. So here's a brief history of like the kind of like games and their overlap with hip hop. So, you know, before games were mainstream, before hip hop existed, we had Space War. Space War was built by a bunch of presumably white dudes in a like MIT lab where nobody could have access to it except people who had like computers that were this big. So it was just basically video games were for, like they always talk about how it's like the first indie game, and I'm like, if you call a university funding all of your research independent like art, then sure. And you know, if it stayed that way, then it wouldn't be where it is today. And so in the 70s, 80s, you know, so hip hop was born, and you get a lot of this element of like rap, that video games had rap battles, they had b-boy competitions, they had going all city as a personal achievement for seeing your tag in every borough. And so there was this element of play that was in games while games were still just basically Pong. And so you get to the early 90s, and I didn't finish this next slide. These are some really amazing albums that came out in like 93, I think, and so 93, 94, and like this was like, I don't know, this was what was in everyone's mind if you were in hip hop. And so then this is what comes out in 95, early 95, Rabjam Volume 1, which is just a basketball game with, like, it's got these beautiful sprite art of these people, the rappers, like Queen Latifah's in a game, like that's awesome. The game looked like this. And it played like garbage, and this was like January 95. It's like on YouTube, people are just always making fun of it. And like weirdly it came out like, you know, like 2 months before this, like NBA Jam Tournament Edition, which also has, like, it's funny that no one says, oh, it had Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff and like it had the Beastie Boys in it. I'm like, so why is that on anyone's list, even though it's also a good basketball game? But still, it was just a skin, right? It was just putting these things on top of NBA culture. And so then there was this weird insidious nature, though, which started happening actually a year before these games that were like games with rappers in it, where, you know, Donkey Kong Country has this like the element of like young versus old, and like he's like dancing to a boombox, and you're just kind of like, why are you equating black people and monkeys? But you know, that's one game, right? Okay, so
yo, check this out.
in Killer Instinct, which also came out in 1994, you have TJ Combo, the token black guy, he's got a rap song, or a hip hop beat playing underneath his, with kind of half of the It Takes Two woo. So, they're trying to do something. But then the next game they come out with has Diddy Kong freestyling? I don't know what he's doing with a boombox, but Rare is just continuing their black people are monkeys. So this is a thing that I don't think anybody noticed. So then you get to the mid to late 90s. You've got Parappa the Rapper, which is again anthropomorphizing rap into animals, but it at least people spoke, and there was this element of play in you could change things up. You had Wu-Tang Shaolin style, which everybody in Wu-Tang hates because it was basically a marketing opportunity, and it was it was kind of starting to see how there's this veneer of rap and hip hop just kind of placed over stuff, because Wu-Tang Shaolin style was just a reskinned version of this terrible game Thrill Kill. And then there was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, where you started to see the idea of you got the High and Mighty in there with you got Mos Def, and that's really cool. They had songs that people never hear otherwise in this skate game because they had the technology to do this. But then they also had this piece of shit where it's the DK rap, and they're just you know what, new console, let's just do 8 times as bad. Let's just make a rap that's the worst thing ever. My man in the back comes in an afro, it's tripling, quadrupling, 64ing down on this thing. And then you get later on where you get these commercials where someone's clearly thinking about video games in hip hop culture. They're oh, you're gonna buy some Lugs boots, and this dude's cool, and he's but this was not in video games. This was the idea of what if a video game had somebody with Lugs boots in it. And I thought that was very interesting because that was being thought about, but by marketing professionals and not by game people. And we recently had we have articles that talk about how MTV Music Generator, Soundwave famously got his career based on this. These were all kind of late 90s things. And then we get to the early 2000s where you get this bit of hip hop and culture coming together, and NBA Jam, NBA Street Volume 2 was not just it was different than NBA Jam in that they basically, you start off with They Reminisce Over You, just playing, and it just feels like you're somewhere else. And it just feels like this piece of culture. And then you have Def Jam Vendetta, where everybody who worked on it, rappers included, actually say, I really felt like I was in that game. I felt like they listened to me. I feel like this was a good thing that we were doing because they were trying to make a story, they were trying to make a thing that was a product of that. Then you also had Jet Set Radio, which was Japanese games, and these were interesting because they dealt with the breakdancing side of it, they dealt with the graffiti side of it, which had basically been removed because every time everybody thought about hip hop in games, they just thought about rappers. And this one actually was well, let's actually do graffiti, to the point where everyone was scared and they all got really upset, and then they had to put this in front of it, making it a little toothless, and it was just this game where you got to do all this graffiti? Well, we don't do it at home, kids. And so, the fear of graffiti that we've seen always, the fear of hip hop in general, was to this game that didn't even sell that well, they had to basically put that up there. And then you also had proto hip hop. You had the Warriors, which is a little bit of a whitewash story about the real Bronx meeting where they were trying to end gang violence, and which gave birth to hip hop. Hell yeah, I almost used that picture. Then you have Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which they were okay, cool, we're actually going to involve somebody. They had DJ Pooh come in to write for this game. You can see he's the 3rd writer on this on Wikipedia, and that's pretty awesome. Then you have unfortunate things like Get on a Mic, where it's again rap is just kind of a layer thing. And then you have this interesting Beaterator, which Rockstar also put together with Timbaland. They recorded videos with him. It's supposed to be, he beatboxed for the trailer. Then you get 50 Cent Blood on the Sand, which if you read about it, it kind of sounds like they would just bring builds of them to show them to him, and then his kids said, I want helicopters, and the devs were what? And it was like, well, what if you brought it to the kid earlier? You would have put helicopters in the game earlier, but you probably just didn't involve him all that much. Then you get the 2010s, get another karaoke game, which is supposed to be a lot better, although like they apparently didn't get enough rights to a lot of the songs, so they're being sued into the ground, and it made the company go out of business. And it's also it was published by a former Rockstar Games founder. Then you get this veneer again, where like Snoop Dogg's just in a bunch of games, but like he's just like a hidden character in True Crime, which is from before the late 2000s. And you get Way of the Dog, where they actually kind of allude to him somehow not being a successful like worker person because he works hard, and they're just like, man, he really worked hard on this. And I'm like, yeah, he's a millionaire. What do you want? Like, of course he works hard on things. And then he's in Tekken Tag Tournament 2 in the back. But then you also get this like, so things are like kind of regressing, right? Because then you get like GTA 5, like there's no DJ Pooh on this, right? I know at least one of the people on this. I know two of the people on this, but they're, white dudes from Britain, right? Like they're not like, there's no like black dude from it like writing this game. And if you kind of look at it, it is not steeped in what it was before. So it's actually kind of removed this element. And now we're kind of getting to some weird stuff, like hip hop on mobile is just kind of terrible. You get Floor Kids, which is like a really cool breakdancing game, and then you get like Run the Jewels and Gears of War, but they're multiplayer characters and don't really have like a campaign, which that's what I would want. So then you get the here and now, and this is today. We're gonna talk about hip hop and video games. So we've got Davionne Gooden, amazing developer. Got Inongo, goes by Sammus, amazing rapper, producer, doctor. Got Mike Eagle, got just coming off of New Negroes TV show, amazing rapper. I'm like a fan of everybody who's coming up on here. We got Raheem Megaran, and we're gonna talk about this, so come on up.
So hi.
Hey.
What's
good? It was Camo Pants Day, eh?
Oh yeah.
Oh, so we just missed the memo. That's cool. Thanks.
You didn't see the email, man?
Y'all gotta coordinate better.
Walk off the stage right now.
So, like, as a little icebreaker, and because I've been thinking about this a lot, just want to do a quick roundtable. Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat?
Wow, right off the bat. Classic Street Fighter for me, but the new Mortal Kombat is dope. So I'm like, yeah.
All Street Fighter, 100%. I don't like fighting games that have a block button.
Yeah, definitely Street Fighter all the way. But yeah, the new Mortal Kombat is pretty dope. But yeah, Chun-Li, that's my main, 100%.
Street Fighter as well.
So, I mean, I guess I wanted to. So it's like actually kind of interesting because that comes from like I've been sitting around and like I know a lot of Chicago rappers, and I just listen to a lot of songs, and like even though like Midway is in Chicago, I'd say most people working on hip hop think that Street Fighter is their thing. And it's just kind of interesting that like a company that's in the middle of like a very black city couldn't seem to like they didn't start with black people in their game. They seemed to miss the boat on Last Dragon. Like, Liu Kang could have been that dude. Like they could have gotten him. He could have came over, and like that game would have been a whole different thing. And we wouldn't be arguing on the internet about the white genocide that Jax enacts at the end of Mortal Kombat. Which is not actually a thing, because all he just said was, what if slavery doesn't exist anymore? But also some good stuff in my life is still here too. So like we have these discussions. So I kind of wanted to just also start off with, like, we'll just go around and where do games intersect with your creativity, because you all do interesting things, and were you into games before hip hop or vice versa? anybody can start.
I think for me, they kind of happened around the same time, and I would try my best to separate them, and I think that most of my peers would as well, where gaming was like the nerdy, weirdo thing to do, and hip-hop was the cool thing to do. Even though like the rhymes may have been influenced by a game character, a concept. But yeah, I think they were happening around the same time for me. I can still remember my first experience of putting them together was taking a recorder and sitting it next to the TV when Mega Man 2 music would play, or any game where you could pause it and the music would still play. And I think Battletoads is probably the one. There's this dope beat when you pause it, it just goes. And so at that moment, I'd be like, oh. And then as I was like, maybe if I'm pausing to go and do my chores or to go grab a sandwich, I would find myself freestyling to that beat, like, I'll be right back, or just something like that. And I didn't realize that until like kind of recently. I was like, oh, I think that might have been where it started for me, was just that hearing the music while the game was paused, it gave me time to think about something else and thinking about how that could be used in other forms of media. So yeah, I think it was the same time for me.
I haven't had much like actual crossover in terms of me making music that's video game influenced, but I mean, video games have just always been a part of my life and a part of my childhood and a part of the way that like I socialized. And it's also been a large part of the way that I've engaged with listening to music. Like, you know, in college, we would all get in somebody's, you know, dorm room and be playing Madden or NFL 2K or whatever. And just, you know, we'd be playing whatever albums came out. And, like, that's how we'd sit and listen. And that was all kind of part of it. And so that's still part of my process a little bit now when it comes to listening to music, is a lot of times I'll be playing a game while I have something playing. And that's kind of how I engage with it.
Yeah, so I got into games pretty early, but hip-hop I got into, like, really late, like, around, like, freshman year of high school. And I remember, like, when I first got into games, like, it was just kind of like the, like, you know, like Raheem, like what you were saying, where it's just kind of like very separate. Like, gaming is like for, you know, the nerdy things, and like hip hop, like, you gotta, like, that's a cool thing. But for me, I just kind of like didn't care. I was like, I don't care if games are cool or aren't cool. I'm just gonna keep doing it. And then when I started first making games, what a lot of times do is just like have like music like work like on in the background like as I'm working. And I remember one day I was like listening to a Chance the Rapper song, and I was like, hey, that'd be cool if like this song was like in this game. Why don't I just like try to like, you know, just like experiment a little, like put it in the game? And I was like, oh shit, this is actually pretty dope. So I just kind of like went from there, just kind of like seeing like how like that vibe can like fit in as much as possible, because like you don't like see like that type of vibe like in games like just at all.
I think for me, it was definitely video games before hip hop. And in fact, I would say video games are the reason why I make music at all, because I fell in love with video game music. That was the first like form of music that I felt like was my own and that I could listen to and that intrigued me. I remember going to the orthodontist office with my older brother. He had braces, and in the receptionist's office, they had Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And so I was like super excited when he had to get his teeth work done. He was not so happy about that, but yeah, I would just be in there. Other kids would play. We'd kind of take turns. And when I went home, the music was still in my head, and it would just be in my head until the next time we got to go back. So I really fell in love with the idea of maybe making that kind of music at some point, and that's what drove me forward creatively, was just this desire to make something that made people feel the way that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or Final Fantasy 7 or any of these other games with an amazing soundtrack made me feel.
I love all of that. Yeah, for me, yeah, I remember like the kid that I would hang out with and play video games with because he had them at his house and I didn't have anything really. I had a 2XL, that like robot thing that was supposed to like talk to you, and he put Wu-Tang's first album in it, and I was like, how is this happening? And I didn't realize he just switched the tape, and I was like 10 or something, but it was also that was like so rough for me because I'm like, I like to listen to the Lion King soundtrack and stuff. So it took me becoming a teenager to really like start listening to High 97 and like buying like Nostradamus, like the not good Nas album, and like kind of stumbling through, like, you know, I bought the Fugees like a bootleg amazing. Like that was I was told life-changing by that same friend. I bought Life After Death because that was what was new, and Wu-Tang Forever, which then kind of left me in this like weird place where I didn't understand the canon. You hear all these like responses to things, and it's like kind of like starting something just way later because everyone's talking about like the purple tape. They're like, oh, we told you on the purple tape to stop buying our shit. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. But this is an interesting canon that I'm jumping into. And so, but then for me, I guess, like, video games has just been, like, a driving thing. And recently, like, I think Spotify actually opened up my mind because I could just, like, voracious, because when you don't have money, you can't afford music. And when Hot 97 would just bust out terrible stuff all the time, a lot of times, and to the point where I was, like, I mentally beefed with certain DJs because I was like, why? Well, I just want to hear new stuff. Like, you dropped, like, ATLiens and then nothing else from Outkast. And I'm like, where's that? Like, I want that. So for me, it's definitely been like now. Like, it's now that I can have access, and also Twitter, I think, lets you find out more about people. And then like Show You Suck, who I got to work with, I found out about him because like he was coming to New York, and like Run the Jewels was also coming to New York, and it was on Twitter, and he was talking to LP, and I like went on SoundCloud and just listened to a bunch of his music, and that was actually kind of, I think, what led me to a lot of indie rap actually, was like Twitter and SoundCloud existing, and then that like started really informing game stuff like kind of late in my life. So something that I think is very interesting is like flow and freedom. So older games had to juggle sound effects and music, like, right? Like if you're playing a game and you pick up a coin, the music might drop out. Those games were less likely to hold your hand, so the order of how you did things would be affected. Like Legend of Zelda, right? There's a dude in a cave that you could miss, and then you walk around without anything, just jamming out to the music and getting killed by enemies. And I think Super Mario Brothers actually, like, a lot of the stuff is built to happen on beat, and that's why people they don't like that game just because you run and jump. It's because it's very musical. And then there's also like speedruns these days that they kind of break the game and they show new ways to interact with the game, but also they create this new rigidity, right? Like if you don't do the thing exactly right, then you fail, and you have to do that for like. Right now they stream like people playing their Super Mario Maker levels that are too hard for other people. They stream for 3 days how they can't beat it before they want to upload it for other people to have a hard time with. And so like, and then conversely, like live shows like are never, they're not what people are expecting, right? Like you always have to juggle the fact that someone may come in, even as a fan, like you come in and you're like, well, this person's coming here. It's going to sound exactly like the album, and it will not. And oftentimes people will actually play with that expectation, and it's really awesome. I actually saw like just a weird aside, I saw like Helmet like live, and Unsung is their big song. They did not play that live. They did like the classic like Koji Kondo thing where they started the dun 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 dun, and they went into a different song, and they kept like looking at the audience like, yeah, we're not playing this. Which I wonder if Guitar Hero like hurt that or something, because that was like the song that I just was playing, Guitar Hero. So let's kick this off with Sammus. These days you've been playing a lot with a live band. How has that affected your live performance?
I'm definitely a loner. I have produced all my stuff. I've written all my stuff, and my first full-length album I recorded and mixed myself. And I thought that was like the best way for me to work as an artist. And so I eventually, in being in a lot of like punk spaces and other spaces with artists who perform with bands, thought it might be cool to work with like a bassist and a live drummer. And that experience has completely changed my mind about what collaboration can do for me as an artist and as a thinker and as a person. Because it's really, I'm sure those of you who actually work well with others know that it's this really beautiful synergy that takes place when you're like just jamming on ideas or just jamming on concepts or things that you might bring to the table that are half formed. And so now working with a live band, I think there's more energy and there's more pieces, and it's really fun when the other artists kind of add to the things that I bring to the table. So when I first would come in, I would say, this is how I want the bass played, this is how I want the drums played. And now that we've been working together for 2 years, they kind of, they'll freestyle and do their own thing, and it just adds this whole other element of surprise, even for me during a show, and I'll have to kind of like respond to them. So it feels it's kind of a gamification there where I'm like responding to them in real time with the kind of feedback that they're giving me. So it's a blast, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, like kind of trying to figure out to kind of stop trying to expect the unexpected and just go with it, like a improvisation essentially.
Yeah.
So Raheem, so like I liked you before I saw you live, and then like you made River City Ransom. I tell you this every time I see you, how much I love this game, this song. It's about River City Ransom, and it's the most like meta thing ever. But it's it's well produced. It's awesome. And like I was watching you live last year when you came for the SummerSlam show with Mike, but the thing that like I don't know that just like wrecked my brain and made me like just sit down. Was like it's the thing I tell everybody. Like even it's trumping the song that I love was that you just started doing this freestyle where you said, everyone just hold up stuff and I will take it and incorporate it into my freestyle. And it was just like, it was this amazing bit of storytelling. Like, so like when I don't know, do you ever think that there's like a place for that in like games? Like, do you ever think that like somehow games, because I feel like games are often like really like, they dip their toe, or it's like Tony Hawk, but it's never like Mega Man or
freestyle.
Whatever.
I don't know. I used to think that I wanted that, and then there were some times where you get it in a game and you have a little too much freedom, I think, and that can be intimidating. I still remember the first time, and I might get killed for this, but first time I played Super Mario 64, I didn't like it. I was like, well, where do I go? Like, why don't they tell me where to go? Like, what's going on? I can go this way, that way. What? This is too much. So
I didn't like it because Mario was saying woohoo, and I was like, why is he talking? That's
great.
weird.
You know what I mean? It's like we just like weren't ready for this type of freedom and these new things that were happening. And I was just like, wait, I want them to just show me an arrow and tell me where to go. Like I'm just wandering, And so I had to expand my mind and what the capabilities of video games were. And at that time in '96, I guess I wasn't ready for that. But yeah, I would really love to see that a lot more. I don't know how though. I love when games throw me for a loop. I just started. What's I can't even remember now. The Undertale follow-up is
Deltarune?
Deltarune. I started it, and I'm amazed at that game's ability to make me smile, to pop me at a moment where I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that. Like, you start the game off, I don't want to give it away, but there's a huge twist at the very beginning, and you're like, oh, all right, I didn't expect that. So I think it is possible to play with what the expectation, and it's fun, but some players are not necessarily ready for it. So almost like I don't know if there's a comparison with the freestyle. To me, the freestyle is a tightrope act, which I'm doing live, and that's why I appreciate it, and I think that's why people do. It's like, oh, he could totally screw this up, and I'll be the one to catch him off, throw him off. I'm going to pull out that orange, and he'll never be able to rhyme that orange, yeah, I got you, So that possibility is what makes it exciting. And I would hope, I would imagine games can do that in some way. I think that probably the next creators, hopefully in this building, that can do it. And I just want to be able to get that feeling when you pop in a game and like, I can catch the developer slipping, like I can catch something he didn't catch.
I think, it sounds like some of the stuff that's happening with ProcGen is analogous to freestyle. Like there's a set, rules and set textures and set, certain map rules that they have to follow. But then the fact that like a game like Dead Cells, for instance, where like every time you start it, it's laying out the level a different way. And maybe you would be looking to see if they fuck up and do one twice. You know what I mean?
Or like the OP like drops where like if you get in and just like you get like this weapon that you're like, oh, I found this secret thing. This weapon's really good secretly, and the developers don't know, and hopefully they don't patch it because then my plate, then my neck. But then the whole point is then you have to go in and learn again, right?
Right.
So Davionne, I feel like that like in your game, you have these conversations. You have multiple like kind of interaction points in She Dreams Elsewhere, right? Where because it's an RPG, so RPGs often have constraints of interaction, right? Because it has turn-based fighting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're good.
And so you have conversations as one interaction, then you have these fights as another. But between scenes, you have this kind of focus on like the music changing to set like a different mood, right? And I feel like and you've said this, and this is why we're here, is because the music is super important in your game, and you work with like indie hip hop artists to like make the soundtrack for your game. And do you ever find yourself designing your interactions in a way that creates this certain flow to the music, like where kind of, and how do you avoid the rigid constraints of RPGs in that space?
Yeah, so I come from a film background where you're just kind of like actually like directing the actual experience like in a like linear fashion. And one of my whole things is that like I always want to like set like the right vibe. And when it comes to music, I think the song, like music is what really just like ties the entire thing together. So whenever like I'm sitting down to write like design level, like I'm always just like thinking like having that music like in the background, just like thinking like how it's gonna be incorporated, how can I like switch it up, how can I like just kind of like reflect like the character's emotions, like what's happening on screen, yada yada. But yeah, as far as just like rigid constraints of like RPGs, like I'm not sure if I like really just like think about it too much. It's just kind of like me just doing me. Like I just kind of like variety's the spice of life, as they say. So I just like mixing it up, making weird shit.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that. Like, I feel when a conversation takes a turn, I don't know, it feels just a little different because I don't know. Yeah, like I feel like a lot of games are like, here's this pumping beat, here's this pumping like trumpet happening, and your game's like, nah, it's chill, like lo-fi hip hop beat, and you walk in and it's because it's a party, and it's like it's not like a song that wouldn't be there. Yeah, and then the conversations also are really lively. I like that because the writing it circumvents a lot of that, like just, hello, how are you doing here? They're like, how are you doing? It's like, I'm a mess, and it's like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's like my other like big thing. Like, yeah, it's like I try to be like as like naturalistic as possible. Like those conversations, like they're just real like 1 a.m. like conversations that we just have, and it's chill.
So Mike, something that actually, it's funny because I first saw you when you opened for Doomtree at like the Highline Ballroom, which doesn't exist anymore, and like you spent a lot of space like behind your beat pad, and you really drive your thing. You have like a bit of an improv thing. I've talked to Video Dave where he's like, I wish Mike gave me sets, and he doesn't, so then I have to just like improv. And I think that's really interesting. And like but the beat pad, like a lot of people are okay with like play beat, walk away and do my song and come back and play beat, but you play with crowd expectations with your beat pad, I feel. And like actually one of my friends who was with me at like last time I saw you, he was just like, does he have a beat pad? And like he was just like amazed because the beats, like it just feels a bit more like lively, like it's like. And so how did you come to like incorporate that in your act?
Well, I come from like a long line of indie rappers, especially based out in LA, where like everything in some sense was about going against expectations. So like for us, like the way we approach writing rap, recording rap, performing, everything. So for us, it was always weird to like have a DJ, because it was just like, okay, but why? Like why is it that this other person needs to be triggering the music? And so me as the rapper, like it kind of takes away some of my ability to, drive the train and decide when a song should start or when a drop should happen. The first thing that I used to do to kind of take control of the music myself, I used to play my set off of my phone and run it through a DJ mixer, and I would just hit the faders just to do a drop, and like that was just enough. And people saw it and be like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." Now, mind just before I knew about airplane mode, though, so sometimes I would like get a phone call in the middle of my set.
Like, pardon me.
And, so it wasn't the most reliable, but it was a way to like you said, to play with people's expectations. It was also a way for me as a performer to keep me more engaged, because I don't want to be on autopilot just like rapping and doing songs. Like I want to be more involved. So as my performances kind of just developed along that line.
Yeah, that's again, it's like, I think it's the thing that it really works, and I feel like, yeah, like I sometimes think about like if designers could play with people's expectations a little more, and I want to get into that, but first, I want to loop back, and so I had a really emotional experience this year, because like I've listened to like 1080p before, and it felt away, and I like the song. Obviously, if you don't like the song, you're wrong. I've seen, you have a music video that, like you have Jean Grey on the track, but she's not in the video. She's in the album. I've seen you perform it live, but then I was sitting and, like, I guess preparing for this and listening to it, and after, because you gave an XOXO talk that was amazing about the power of, like, emotional vulnerability and how you can kind of use that to, like, bond with people, and you should all watch that. It's on YouTube. Everybody has, like, great talks that are on YouTube. But like my mom died this year, and when your mom's talking, like, I was like, but yeah, so to your song can be a gut-wrenching experience based on where someone's coming to it, but also when you made this album, right? Like, you've got a lot of really upbeat stuff leading into, like, so did you, like, how did you go about ordering that album? Because, like, I felt like 1080p is like a single, right? And then it's also, but it's also like the player, or listener's rather, journey. Like, they always say, like, in a game, if you want someone to see something important, put it up front, because they might leave. And I know, like on Spotify, if you look at, like, the listens, right? Like, it's like it goes down as you go down any album, unless it's a single. And that song is, like, towards the end, and I feel like that's, like, the scariest song because it just shows up. So, like, how did you go about, did you think about, like, putting it there, like, to put someone in a space where maybe they've had so much uplifting material that now they can have a big drop? Or
Well, first I want to say I'm sorry to hear about your mom. That's really difficult. In terms of the ordering of an album, I think about it a lot in terms of the same way that I think about a show, like carrying people through a wave of emotions, because I'm a very up and down person, so I want my album to reflect that. I mean, I've heard different strategies around how albums are ordered. I've heard, like, the second song is the single. You want to lead in with something that's fresh and new that nobody's ever heard, and then the second song should be something that folks are familiar with. And I kind of have been like, fuck that. I just want to, like, do this in a way that I think sonically takes people up and down through what it means to be me. So I might order things like, oh, this is a fast tempo song, let me slow it down, let me build it back up, let me slow it down. So in terms of that track specifically, 1080p, because Jean Grey is on that track and she's so dope, I was like, let me put this towards the end because people will wait for that. People will listen to the whole thing to get to that, So I feel like I could have made that the last song. I think she's special enough and that song is special enough to me that folks will work their way through it. And, if not everybody listens to albums all the way through, so it kind of, at this point, it's more of an expression for myself than anyone. I think folks just kind of go where they want to go. But yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you. I don't know, like, I felt like uplifted listening to like, it was different. Like, I listened to the song and I'm like, someone's mom's talking, and now you really gotta like it's like, I feel like she's reassuring, like, all of us.
Wow, I'll tell her that she said that.
So, so I've been thinking about, tools. With, like, music and games, there's always, like, these arguments about tools. I feel like there's, like, this limit of access to tools in both games and hip-hop are these parallels. Like, it's kind of interesting because we had that blackout recently that took out, like, not all of New York, but it was on the 42nd anniversary of the blackout that basically gave birth to, like, hundreds of hip-hop groups that basically took hip-hop mainstream, for better or worse. Because, like, they always joke because they're like, man, like, now there's just, like, 32 groups doing this, and it becomes harder. And maybe it pushed it forward because people were like, oh, we have to work harder to stand out. And at that same time, games have just always been kind of insular, and we've been the democratization of tools for games has been actually like, it's still actually argued. There are older people who are like, there are too many games, I can't sell my game as well. And you're like, man, you got like millions of dollars, like what do you want? Like you want just to be like remember like when there was the big indie game push, there were like a few games and then there's more games, and they start calling it the indie apocalypse. And I'm like, have you listened to music recently where there's like 10,000 songs that come out per second? And especially like the idea SoundCloud rapper is like a pejorative for like using a tool to promote your stuff. And also we just had this like article come out, like we had the article about hip hop about the DJ Booth article about Music Generator and how it basically inspired a generation of producers. And we have the bipolarness of the feelings of the when Madlib said that he produced Bandana on his iPad. And I remember one of the first comments was you being like, whoa, that's cool. And then other people were like, I'm throwing this album in the trash. And like, just like, because they heard that a tool that everyone could use, they were all like, some people were like, wow, how? And some were like, yeah, I knew that, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, okay. So I want to go, so Nongo, you are producer, right? You produce all your beats. And since you do all of that, how has tool access affected you? Especially like, you know, you, like, because, and also because you are the, like, you are in charge of everything. Like, how does that affect how you create?
So tool access is everything to me. I first learned how to make beats using Reason on a computer. My older brother showed me how to make beats there. And I spent a whole summer making like a full album of just beats that I showed to my friends, and they were like, this is weird. And then I, fast forward, I started making beats on MTV Music Generator. Raheem, I know you use this as well. And that, I loved that game, but I wasn't sure how to export the beats, so I felt like I had to just leave that alone because I wanted to have this, the process of like burning a CD, I think that was right around when iTunes allowed you to burn like your own like CDs at that point, and so burning my beats onto a CD and then giving them out to people was really important for me as part of that process. But yeah, I'm all about the accessibility of the tools and the knowledge that we have, and I think folks who are fearful of that and fearful that that will replace their form of expertise, you know, I think there's nuanced discussions to have about that, but ultimately I think it's a great thing when more people get to make this stuff, and the folks who are really passionate and making interesting stuff and doing weird shit with it, that will rise to the top always. I think keeping people from doing that isn't going to like change people's creative drive or ability, and I know I've been inspired by folks who are there's a rapper named Prince Harvey who recorded, I believe, his whole album in like an Apple store. Like he would go to that same Apple store and and make this album, and you can look it up. It's like super inspiring to me. So when I'm in my worst funk and feeling like, oh, I can't do this, it's like, yo, that kid went and made beats at the store, like other people around, like I can do this. So yeah, I think it's empowering and exciting when more folks have access to these tools.
I really, you know, just to jump in, I think that's, you know, it's kind of native to the spirit of hip hop too. Like it's about repurposing, you know what I mean? It's about like making music in conditions where you don't have access to instruments or access to like lessons to learn how to play instruments. You don't have school programs that, you know, put these things in your hand and teach them to you. So like people took the music around them and figured out how to make new music around it. And like that is the spirit of hip hop. That's why like there will always be like, yeah, a SoundCloud rap. There's a new platform to make rap on, people are going to do it, and they're going to do it with whatever's around them, with whatever they can afford. Like, if there's no recording equipment, people will beat on things, you know what I mean? And like, we will make drum sounds, we will rap, like that's kind of always going to be it, and there's something about that raw spirit of it that's just always going to shine, and people are always going to want to hear that. And I think, you know, everybody wants to stay hip and stay on top of things, so yeah, if you hear Madlib made stuff on an iPad, it might freak you out because, oh, you spend all this money on all this equipment, but it's like that's what he's trying to tell you. The spirit of it is taking whatever's around you and making it do what you want it to do. Like that's the spirit of hip hop.
Also, it's limitation, right? Because it's I saw a video where like Lizzo's talking about like it's like making a song on New York Times or whatever, or I forgot what it was, and like there's this huge studio and this dude's like, yeah, we did this thing, and I'm like, you look at that and you're like, how do I do this? Because you have like this piece of land that's like $1 million or something to put like these like weird speakers and whatever. And then when a guy is like, oh yeah, I use an iPad, I'm like, oh, that's cool. That made me feel hopeful. For me, I think I had the same thing with the Beats and with RPG Maker. Also, I never knew how to export a game, which actually perfectly segues to so like with game tools. Like people are like, oh, you made a Unity game or whatever. You should make a real game and often we get like people who put a lot of money into like their own engine and their company goes out of business because they put all of their money into their engine. How has like working in RPG Maker like? Because I feel like RPG Maker is a thing that's built to let you make RPGs, and that's really nice. But your game's also doesn't look anything like anything I've ever seen in that. So how have you like, I don't know, built yourself within that engine to do something different, and have you felt any sort of like that weird gatekeeping that tends to happen?
Yeah, so I know in the earlier days, like when I was like first like starting out like my games, it's like, you know, the usual reaction like, oh, it's just an RPG Maker game, like make a real game, yeah, like that type of stuff. But and people, they talk shit about RPG Maker like on the daily, and you know, I have my own gripes with it, but the reason why I love it is because I started back when I was in 5th grade with that program. And here I was, like this 5th grader, little fuckboy, had no clue what he's doing. Never had more than a C in math, but like could still like get to the ground running.
But he was a curious fuckboy.
Yeah, I was a curious fuckboy.
I think we have different definitions of what a fuckboy is. Right?
Yeah. No, back in the day, I was definitely a fuckboy. Believe me.
Nah, he knows what it is.
Okay. Continue.
Anyway. Yeah, just like this random dude, just like random kid, no like game making experience, whatever, could like just get to the ground running, just start making games. And RPGs like always like been my favorite genre like as a whole. And I'm like, yeah, you know, and I started out with Game Maker first before RPG Maker. And my very first project, I tried to like get the character to move. They did not move. And I was like, all right, I'm good with game dev for now. That's good. Then there's RPG Maker and it's like, oh, like there's the basics, there's the essentials like right then and there. I can just go. So I stuck with that. I kept making stuff like throughout the years. And it got to the point where it's just kind of like, yo, I just want to like make my own thing. So like really at the end of the day, like the engine, like it's just a tool, and it's just the person behind that tool is whatever like, that's what like really counts.
I helped a guy put out a RPG Maker game as well, and we did the soundtrack, and we had a lot of. It was the first time I'd ever like helped to release a game. You know, I know all about promoting music and releasing music, but over the last probably 5 or 6 years, learning about film and then learning about releasing games, totally different animals. So we got a publicist involved. I was like, all right, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Get a publicist to help push your game, and we had a lot of reviewers who refused to review the game because it was made in RPG Maker. And they were like, yeah, we don't touch those. You know.
What was the game's name?
The game's called Tales of the Elements. It's on Steam. Fun game. And man, this guy worked for like 2 years on it. Like just built a great soundtrack, great story. Like I'm in there too. It's kind of neat. And but I thought it was so different. I was like, well, just give the story some time. Give play it for an hour. You'll realize that this is actually really fun and original. And people were like, yeah, sorry. Like if it's not made on like a real thing, we can't even look at it. So yeah, I've definitely experienced that, and that was like a huge wake up call for me. Like, wow, like there is that gatekeeping thing. Like, okay, all right, found it. There it is. You know.
I also really quickly want to throw in that in particular, a lot of the other like women artists that I know, part of the work that they're doing and we're doing is trying to kind of remove this like fetishization that happens around gear and tech and stuff, where it's like the the tech itself is like a stand-in for your expertise or your authority or ability to do something. And so when someone comes in with this like lo-fi or low-tech way of doing it, it's seen as like an affront. And I think a lot of feminist work is in rejecting those ideas about what sort of the tech means and the kind of bravado that's often attached with it. And that breaking down that barrier is really important, I think, when you're part of a group that doesn't have that access, or where their informal circles are the only way to get that access. So you need to have some type of way to like get in there. And so I think, yeah, when you all were speaking, that just kind of reminded me of that, the importance of that in my work.
Yeah, so I have a million more questions, but we're out of time.
No.
This has been an amazing discussion. You can play Davionne's game. It's out there. And you should follow everybody on this thing.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here because you're all amazing. And let's keep this conversation going, just because, you know, part of this comes from, I feel like a lot of kids say they again, they go to SoundCloud, they try to make like beats, and like I want kids to make games, and I want them to make games for their beats or beats for their games or whatever, and I think that's important. And I feel like
Totally.
Yeah.
I wanted to just jump in with that too. Like developers, like don't be afraid to reach out to indie musicians, particularly hip hoppers. Don't think like, well, it's not a hip hop game per se, so I can't find any room for it. And I feel like if we grow out of that mentality, then we can be a lot more inclusive in what we do, because we all want the same thing. We all love games, and we want to do our part to help make them better, I think, you know?
As
Hell
someone
yeah.
who's done that exact same thing, it has worked out very well. So yes, hit up your local indie rappers, indie musicians, and vibe out.
We're going for your parents.